The simple question today is basically how to integrate AI so you get value out of it. And for this, simply I talked to Lisa Weaver-Lambert. She is, upon many things, the author of the AI Value Playbook, and she helps us understand today what are the business problems of AI. And before I talk too much, welcome to the podcast. It's another interview episode of the Beginner's Guide to AI. It's Dietmar again on the microphone, and let's just jump right in. I can talk much about what Lisa does, but the best is to give her the microphone and ask her, how did you come to do something with AI? How did that happen?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be speaking with you. So, listen, I cut my teeth in financial services on acquisition, retention, fraud detection programs a long time ago. A lot of my work was on data quality and governance, and it was a great discipline to learn. I moved in my career early on to the US, and I was lucky enough to experience the value of large data sets and how they can use analytics to solve real world problems. My professional experience has been developed in cloud organizations and enterprise technology companies. I've worked for Microsoft, Accenture, and in private capital, in private equity. And in addition, I've held line management positions for leading brands such as Barclays, Santander, Pfizer, Net-a-Porter, John Lewis, and I've served on several boards. I'm passionate about leveraging technology to create impactful solutions, and I just recently published a book, the AI Value Playbook, where I interviewed over 30 leaders in the domain across geographies and across industries. And my personal mission is to equip non-technical leaders with the knowledge and confidence to leverage AI for their organizations.
That is actually, the non-technical. I think that's what we have on the podcast here also. Most of the people are not the technical people, but still, I mean, you work with data centers, and then what was your moment? When did it make tick, AI?
There wasn't just a moment. I mean, I've been working with data throughout my career. When I was in New York, I studied statistics at NYC. Then, when I came back to Europe, I studied data science with Berkeley. Before all of this now became sort of largely in the publicly domain. So I've always been very interested in using data sets to solve problems. And then in terms of AI, I was a lot more exposed to machine learning in Microsoft because Microsoft had already adopted machine learning in core processes in its finance function for over 10 years. And of course, I was there when it acquired or made a considerable investment into OpenAI, so got exposed to generative AI very quickly. But AI as a solution has been around for many years now. So I've just found myself working with people who are very committed to this domain, evolving it in the engineering field. And it's always been core to what I have done through my career.
Yeah, so it's not like there was ChatGPT, let's try it. No, it was like long before even studying statistics and machine learning. When in old times artificial intelligence was not the term, and then the book is really interesting. You interviewed business leaders about adopting AI.
Yes, how they were actually adopting AI, because it was all well and good to sit within a tech scaler and have infinite talent, very clear direction and, very, excellent resources to work with. But when you go out into the real world, it gets a lot more messy. So when I was working in private equity, it became abundantly obvious to me that there were very different maturity levels in terms of how companies are using data. And quite often, a lot of companies that have been around for some time are really at those foundational levels. They're not necessarily in the right tooling, the right infrastructure to exploit their data. They may still be, for many reasons, on-prem as well. And a lot of the tools previously, because now Google has shifted in terms of this, were only accessible within the cloud. And also there was a lot of promise in, and there still is, in productivity gain. And I was not necessarily seeing the evidence for this. And I think, in my research, I went back to the Solow paradox, which was coined by an economist, Robert Solow, in 1987, when he could see that there were computers everywhere, but the influence wasn't evident in the productivity statistics. And this paradox was resolved in the 1990s when large sectors of the economy, such as retail, wholesale, started adopting technologies such as client-server architectures, ERPs, and these innovations helped ramp business processes, particularly in the supply chain and distribution efficiency. And we've yet to have those breakthroughs at scale with AI. And I didn't just speak to traditional companies. I also spoke to more recent companies that were born in the cloud 6, 7 years ago. And their use of AI is completely different for different reasons, but they are well ahead of the traditional companies.
Wow, the same like with internet. I researched a little bit in the travel industry, and the big ones, they are still not really there. Seems to be the same, like the quick, the new ones, the nimble ones. If the old ones are not careful, they will eat their lunch. Sounds like that.
Well, I think the larger ones will catch up, but I think there's an issue of organizational readiness. There's talent and skills gaps. There are regulatory challenges, and also the integration with existing systems. And one of the key points that came out very clearly for me why those newer companies were able to succeed wasn't just their architecture, but it was actually the commitment of the leadership to the direction as they were going in. So they had a very clear AI strategy roadmap. They were investing in talent and training. They had invested in cross-functional collaboration and taking an iterative approach to implementation. So, I think we're seeing the scaling adoption happening in large technology companies at the moment, and in these newer organizations, because it's easier to pivot. But I think that the others will shift once some of those barriers have been thought through and overcome.
Mhm. Is there a mindset? Do the people, I mean, you talk to those leaders of the business, do they want to adopt, or is that more the position that they know they have to?
Well, they know they have to. I'll give you two completely different examples. So, one company led by a former software engineer, and he actually went back to being very hands-on to explore generative AI himself, started using the technology, and was blown away. He saw the potential, and that was it. There was no going back. But he not only re-engineered the processes within his company, and we can come back to this point because it wasn't as easy as I'm telling it, but he also re-engineered his services and products to his customers as well. But just to give you a completely different example, It's a company that works in the legal domain, contract pad AI, and they, they're obviously led by lawyers. So I was interested in this company because he's not an engineer, okay? He's a technician in his domain, which is highly important as well. And they were obviously a legal tech firm because they were trying to and continue to be serving, contract simplification between parties. And then he also, he told me the story of him being on holiday at the time and his team calling him and saying, you have to look at this, you have to engage. And he realized that was it. I have to. It's going to be painful, but this is now the direction that we're heading in.
Oh yeah, that's interesting because one is like, oh yeah, I want to, and the other, okay, this is the direction, I have to do it. It's like, so it seems to be like mixed all over the place, different areas, different personalities, different styles.
It's about serving the customers first and foremost, and being competitive.
Yeah.
Running the company efficiency.
Yeah, but I see a different view. This software engineer who's totally into that and was like, wow, that's the next innovation. And the other one is like, we have to, or we lose. I mean, both
So-
positions you can have. Yeah.
Yeah, and interestingly, the software engineer in this case, he thought that it was obvious that his team were going to follow. And it wasn't the case. So then he had to go back and invest quite a lot in making the tools accessible to a much broader, group of individuals within his company to bring everybody along and invest in education as well. So even in a domain where the company is making its money out of, an engineering solution, it's not obvious that everybody's going to be on board. And there is not one individual that I interviewed, geography-wise or industry, that didn't emphasize the point about bringing people along. I mean, we can call it change management, but actually investing in education and making sure that people understand how it integrates into their jobs.
I'm a total fan of AI literacy, if you want to call it like this. So educating the people about how to use it, or what are the chances and the dangers. And so, yeah, no, this is I'm in this bubble where I think, yeah, everybody wants to do it, and this probably seems to be the same with that guy. He realized, okay, you have to bring the people on board with everything. Yeah, yeah.
But I can see that, I've been doing some work, obviously, beyond my book recently here in the UK, and it is still very early days for a lot of large organizations. And I think there's been a lot of what I call dabbling, a lot of purchases of licenses. I think some of these scalers have been quite good at pushing licenses into businesses, but then they haven't actually thought through what they want to do with it. So they haven't understood the architecture that they need, and these large models from Google or Microsoft or Meta or other are foundational models. But to do something more interesting with them requires a lot of engineering work. And so you get into application development. And I think that this needs to be really well thought through into either the North Star of companies. And I think the other point being that organizations need to think carefully about, do we need AI in certain situations? Because AI is just a broad definition for a range of software applications. It's a branch of computer science. And sometimes, I have found, I'm on the advisory board of a company called Luminalta that was working with Target, that some smart engineering work to deliver a loyalty app actually increased their revenue substantially because it was done in the right way. And again, having the customer forefront of mind is critical.
Mhm. It always comes back to the customer. It's like that thing. If you can do whatever toy you have there, you have to always think of the customer. It's really actually I think it's a good it's a good way to come to the title of your book because it has value in it. It's like the AI Value Playbook. Um, and I think the question is how to get value out of that. Huh?
Yes. Before I answer that question, I just want to come back to your emphasis on customer, because I interviewed the CEO of Otter AI, and Otter AI is an application that you can have on your phone, on your desktop, which documents meetings with extraordinary precision. It's super, super helpful. Um, and the CEO of this company sort of
Well, for everyone out there, it's written like the animal. So it's exactly that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I know
thank
them.
you.
This is a great. Yeah.
And but how is he evolving his product? He's evolving his product by doing continual releases, and he's getting feedback as people are using the tool. I use the tool, so I see the surveys that are getting released as well, but they have all the usage statistics. And I think you'll find that is prevalent in the releases that we're having from the big tech companies as well. It's very iterative.
Mhm.
So, I don't think they are concerned at all about having a ready, finished product that we were used to in a traditional software sense. This is a very iterative, test and learn type of solution. And so it's a new way to engage with customers. And even into a B2B domain, you can test the tools internally. Dog fooding, we call it in technology, or you use as well your priority customer set and get them using it. But I see that more and more in the successful use of AI, because actually, if you're iterating with your customers, that speeds you up to value considerably. But I think just to go into your question, I was interested as well in terms of following the money. Yeah, who's actually making any money? Because you've got customers, that are obviously paying for a product or services. Then you have the company supplying that, who are then using, they're either developing their own applications, or they are in part using some of these foundational models. And then you have the data centers. So the data centers are obviously making money, and the foundational models making money as you're consuming the cloud of that enterprise. I mean, from a cloud consumption. But then are people actually able to make money within their businesses? And the answer is absolutely yes, they can. And because it is in those instances, it's been really aligned to the key metrics of a company's North Star and ensuring accurate data collection, storage, and processing. There's a clear knowledge of the technical capability. I found most success in companies that are already sophisticated in exploiting their data. So you think about insurance as a domain where assessing claims and so on. So where you have an obvious density of data, but actually understanding data quality, security, the technical, abilities of the company is essential, and also having, the right resources, tools, practices, architecture, integration points. Then companies are thinking about their operating models. They're shifting their operating models for how they can serve, the AI solution. I think in the future, from what I'm I'm hearing we're going to move into a hybrid workforce where on an org chart, you're going to see an AI agent alongside humans. And that AI agent is taking some of the workload of the team, often in the repetitive, administrative sort of volume side of the work. So that gives you, thought to role definitions, skilling people, and then obviously AI adoption and change that we spoke into.
Yeah, no, this is the agent. This is like, I think this is the word. The 2025 will be the year of the AI agent. The interesting thing is, does it take over? I mean, does it free the people to do the important work, or does it take jobs? I mean, this is probably what people are always fearing, because now this is like people like to fear. But do you think takes over their work, or?
Well, I think it's going to depend on the domain. So if you, and it depends on the scale of the company, the size of the teams, because if you take customer service, organizations that have invested a lot in customer service, now, depending on the industry, the impact of COVID was substantial on some of those organizations. And I'm thinking of an example that I have in the book, the Lufthansa Group, where, obviously airlines had to reduce in scale of service during that time, but equally they had to revamp very, very quickly and handle different layers of what was being asked of them. And they have very successfully integrated AI to provide a better service to companies. Now, I did speak to, one leader who said that customer service centers won't exist within 5 years. But I think he's making a point here. But in all of the, also another company that does a provision of service centers, particularly in IT service centers, where you've got volume, repetitive requests coming in, but there's usually a handoff to a human agent for the most complex queries. So I do see it as a hybrid situation, but I think to answer your question, is a complex question, and it really depends on context around the center.
Definitely, yeah. This is it will change. Definitely, it's a new technology. We don't know how and what it comes. If I think about all the call center agents, this is not a nice job. They have never enough people, and the people leave. They don't stay so long. If you can make that work more interesting, because there's real cases and not just the same stuff where somebody shouts at you because something doesn't work, and you tell them, yeah, this is not our fault, or because it's like they messed up something else. I think will really help those people. But yeah, it's totally depending on where you implement something.
Yeah.
So
there was a company I worked with called Expressive in the book, and their client, for example, was a global technology service and insurance software provider, and their growth was so high that they couldn't keep up with the volume of calls coming through to their IT service desk. And the result what Expressive did was actually integrate with the company's existing tool, and they really increased the efficiency here. So they implemented a virtual agent system alongside an overall sort of system overhaul. So I just think it is a curve of modernization and improved service depending on who your customer set are. But that's a good example of AI supporting the growth of a company.
And that comes back to value, because if you can't grow because you don't have enough people, you can't create more value if it's like money value or potential to grow or so. It's all a part of the value that you could create, but you can't at that moment. Yeah.
Yeah. But let me give you a different example as well. So, and this company was working with Sonosim, which is an ultrasound training and education platform. And they needed a scalable mechanism for ultrasound technicians. So we're talking about a very different domain here. And so this company provides education to ultrasound technicians. They needed to increase the speed at which they could be educated about the use, the calibration, and the optimization of these machines. And the legacy solutions relied on traditional search query models, which yielded a long list of results, as you know, and required the technician to sort of sift through large amounts of information to find what was relevant. So what then was implemented was a RAG-based system, so a retrieval augmented generation based AI platform.
Could you
that
quickly explain what that means for the?
that well, basically, this company Vectara, who did the work, they took a repository of 9,000 pages of text, which is about 300 odd textbooks, 5,000 images, 400 video clips, and they digitized this information into a bespoke model for Sonosim that was sitting on top. At this time, it was OpenAI. Whether it is now, I'm not sure. But it was sitting on top of an OpenAI model. But what the retrieval augmented generation was doing was making sure that the results were more accurate. It was grounding the results in the proper data from this very technical set of textbooks, etc. So it improved the accuracy of the generative AI models by fetching facts from and grounding the model in external knowledge sources. And the conversational interface, which was actually an app on the user's phone, enabled interaction with real patient cases so that they could have very personalized learning on their phone. And that overcame huge financial, linguistics, and logistical barriers that were in place before. So this solution had a significant impact in terms of streamlining access to information, enhancing actually, the technician, if you will, the ultrasound technician's engagement and satisfaction, and helped, obviously, the patients themselves. So I think why I brought this example up is that a lot of conversation ends up in service centers, but we find very interesting cases that are being applied to specialist domains. And I found that approach of thin slicing critical to getting to value.
Oh yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, the whole topic of learning, and then you have a general model, but how can you get it to learn that specific topic? And it definitely is something that personalized learning on the level of the person who's there. It's not a one size fits all. You can scale it. And language is what you said. You're not dependent on to have the people teaching in that language. That's quite interesting. I definitely see the people listening to that now thinking about, oh, what can we do? We have also educational firm. How can we help like our engineers or technicians or so? Yeah, it's really like something I'm looking forward to see and even read about. If somebody of your listeners want to comment on that, just do it. It's like we are really curious to see what you do there. One question is, we talked about lots of things that others do. Actually, what do you do personally? Do you use ChatGPT or other AIs?
I use them all. Um,
I know
because
what
I
you mean.
find that they are, um, I have my favorites, but my favorites tend to change because what I find is, and I use, applications as well, paid for applications. We
Yeah.
mentioned Otter, which I use. Um, I find that the releases are happening so quickly that it's worthwhile investing time in playing around with the releases and not getting too stuck with one model versus another. And they tend to, I mean, OpenAI obviously is very good at reasoning now. You've got, Llama, which is, a cute name, but very good at doing, the language side. Gemini is very good at being, factual, and I think that stems from their research, and just the search domain expertise that Google.
I mean, from Google Live. Yeah.
Yeah, but honestly, the performance of these different models, I find, goes down sometimes after a while because they're working on something else. So I abandon it and move to something something different. But I use AI every day for different reasons.
Do you have a typical use case? Something where you say that is interesting for the people that you can copy, or
Yeah. I never use, well, I'll tell you what I don't use it for is idea generation. And I do have a use case in my book that was done with a large consumers goods company that did a lot of customer segmentation, enriching, and product innovation work. And it was very, very interesting from that perspective. But what I find it very useful for is optimizing my schedule. So if I have a base schedule and want to have a different view on how I'm going to spend my time, I find that quite a rational job. So I use it. I use it for that. I also use it for checking different ways of, if I've got a base text, I will look at how that text can be written in different ways, but I don't ask AI, to come up with text. I think that's far too broad. I've had a lot more success with, small prompts. And I think so I tend to experiment with my use. I'm not a coder, but if I was, I'd be using it for coding. And I should start trying to do that because I was listening to somebody who doesn't have the technical ability in a certain software language, but is using AI to use that. But I think one thing I have learned is that if you don't have domain expertise, then you're not able to verify if it's nonsense that you're getting back.
Yeah.
And which is the value of working with applications rather than these large generic models, which I think are fine for experimentation, but you don't get to anything very precise in my experience.
With the programming, I wasn't lucky. It never worked. What I tried, there are different models. I use basically the Claude from Anthropic.
Yes, yeah.
Obviously ChatGPT, and then I try Mistral because it's something European, the French one, and those are the three I basically use. But I tried with all of three, and the simple coding things, you have to already domain expert. You have to like this something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very important. And even when I'm doing my own work, having mastery over the domain is absolutely critical. Yeah.
Yeah. We talked a lot about use cases and which models to use. And so if I am now sitting in front of my headphones on and listen to this and think, how should I implement this in my firm? What do you say? Where should a person start if they don't have AI or don't have systematic usage?
Yeah. So first of all, my advice is to bring it in the room. Okay.
Yeah.
And if you don't bring it in the room, then you won't start playing around with it, because it does, some of these models, as we've talked about them evolving continuously. So what they're capable of doing, I think we're now moving into, we've been talking a lot about language, but we're moving into multimodal, which means using images, audio, etc. And if you're not bringing it in the room, so I think the first place I would bring it in for a business is around decision making, and actually starting to think through how it can augment decision making. I don't see any company that doesn't need, a different point on decision making. I'm just thinking of conversations that I've had this week. Then in terms of where it's going to be most useful in your organization depends which industry. So I was at an event a couple of weeks ago with a retailer. There were 200 people in the room, all working in the commercial side of retailing, so in merchandising and marketing, and so on. And I got them to rank very quickly. They came up with their biggest pain point that they needed to work through. And it's usually a core process within the company. So I think take a process lens first and don't think about applying AI to the whole process. There's going to be part of the process that is going to be more applicable. And I'll bring that to life. So I was working with a company last year, which is in the area of collectibles, where they collect football cards, coins, etc. And they have a funnel where you would send in your batch of football cards. They have to be packed in a certain way. But the first decision is it a football card or not?
Mm.
And that's where the volume sits. Now, where the technical part sits is how much money is that football card worth? Because it might be torn a little bit, or one of them torn, or so on and so forth. But where AI and vision technology, in this case, it wasn't generative AI, was useful was in that early funnel stage of sorting out, what these products were. Because again, this was a company that was tied for resources, and wasting skills on that end of the funnel just wasn't applicable. It just wasn't relevant. So I think definitely the other thing is to really understand, and we've started to talk about that earlier, but actually understand the technical capability of your organization. And it doesn't mean you have to go and boil the ocean and everything, ready, if you will, for full scale AI adoption. But it does mean that you need to understand, if you're solving a particular problem, let's take merchandising, that where the data is coming from, what the quality is, what the security parameters are. You need a baseline of understanding, and you need to understand the skills in your company. And again, that doesn't mean you've got to go and hire a lot of people. It may mean that you've got to upskill people, which even the large scalers are doing, because there are certain areas of expertise that are really relatively new, or going out and hiring, an ecosystem of, independents or boutique providers. That's, picking something that people are going to care about. So that is absolutely critical, because I've seen a lot of companies go and waste time on, or lots of people involved in AI go and waste time on things that other people in the organization are not particularly bothered about. And you actually have to think about, well, what is the impact that you want to see in the organization up front? And again, I'll bring that to life. So one of the interviews I did was with an incredibly talented individual, and he was working with London Transport. And in London, there was a new law where lorries were not allowed to go on smaller roads, which makes sense. Yep. Now, in the usual case of monitoring traffic infractions is you speed and you get a nice ticket and a photo, and there's not much wriggle room out of the evidence. But this presented a new challenge. So this individual worked on this problem with exceptionally clever people, and they came up with a way of creating a probability model that would calculate the probability that you driving the lorry took the wrong road. But of course, nobody paid attention to probabilities.
Yeah.
And so this was not going to, so the people who made the request from the top of the organization hadn't understood properly the product they were going to get back was always going to be probabilities, and that wasn't going to pass in court.
Yeah.
And the technical team hadn't articulated this well enough to the leadership team. So, but a very clever solution was developed in the meantime. So, working out what the last mile is going to be up front is really important. But I have a number of examples in my book where getting something small done on something that is valuable to the company is what's paved way to success.
Totally makes sense. I remember in the 90s, I had an old professor in IT, and he was already then in the 60s. So he really worked with computers that, I don't know, 10-inch discs. And that was like the innovation then. But he said the most reason why IT projects fail is people and not IT, not the technical part. And it's exactly the thing. They don't talk enough. They don't see the problem. It's the same again. It's like, this is
Yes, and the
great.
skills, I see a lot of companies hiring. Interestingly, a company called me 2 weeks ago where they, in their own words, had failed to have impact with AI. They'd recruited a very smart PhD, but this individual obviously had no experience in working in business or in the domain, but had their knowledge, and too much was expected of them. But because the people hiring, they have been persuaded that they need only very technical people, they're going out and rehiring the exact same skill set. Whereas having a multi-skills team is much more critical than having a small, very technical team, because a broader team can also handle a much broader set of use cases as well. And just adding to your point, so that product or customer experience side, and also the sort of bridge into business, that business architect, those roles are usually ignored. And it usually is a hire of a data scientist, because that's what people have clocked is going to unlock it for them.
Yeah, totally. That's really interesting. This is like, I heard that all over generalists and teams and so, but it becomes more important. But I want to go to the last question. I don't want to yeah, this is time flies. It's so much. I would actually, before we go to the question, ask you, because we talked about the book, where can people actually find the book?
On Amazon.
Amazon, the AI Value Playbook, Lisa Weaver-Lambert. Just search it or go to the show notes. I will put a link in, and
Yes.
this is actually there. You get more and more examples of what we talk about here. For all the people, so yeah, that is it. For all the people looking at the video, actually, you can do that. This on Spotify and YouTube. You can see it. If not, it's in the show notes, and you can find it. And we can find you, Lisa, also probably on LinkedIn, and you can connect to her there. Yeah. Perfect. I will put it in. And now coming for the last question, and that's the robots are coming for you. The Terminator or Matrix question. What do you think? Is it probable that we get a scenario where we, at a certain point, are all batteries for computers?
So I try to avoid futuristic thinking because I think there's so much noise about it. I think there's a lot more value to be had in understanding what's available right now. That we've got models, such as the recent release from GPT in May. We've also had, Strawberry. We've had the integration of text, voice, vision, better reasoning. We've had Claude 3.5. And so I stay close to these releases and avoid the rumors, because I think the releases tell you more about the direction of what is coming out of research centers into the real world. But I do think that what scares me is the speed of AI development. Every company leader I interviewed in the book in a fast-growing scale-up company commented on this. I think, Yuval Noah Harari makes the very strong case for this in his recent book, Nexus. We need time to adapt and understand this technology and the impact to business and society. And I fear a loss of expertise and knowledge. But technology progress rarely arrives in single disruptive moments. It evolves through minor innovations over time, which is why I stay close to these releases. And therefore, it makes it difficult to foresee the full potential impact. And I think, that is how I see it. I just stay away from the rumors and stay close to releases.
Good. Very good. Yeah, no, this is like, this is a nice future question, and it's like always nice to listen to those insights. I really love it, and I want to say thank you to Lisa. She's the first woman on the podcast, and I want to use the chance also to make a shout out on all you girls working in AI. Just come to the podcast. I would love to interview you and show that there are also women out there working on that topic, not just the guys I interviewed. But Lisa, thank you for being here and giving those insights in the practical side of implementation. That was great. I learned a lot.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been delightful speaking with you.
Thank you. Oh yeah, some valuable insights in the practical side of AI. So how to really implement AI in your firm, how to get value out of it. I love talking to Lisa, and actually she's the first woman on the podcast. Again, the call on all you women working in AI. Give me a shout, write to Dietmar at argo.berlin, and I want to have you on the podcast to show there's more out there than just those guys sitting at their computer. It was great talking to Lisa, and don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, get the newsletter. It's argoberlin.com/newsletter. And hope to have you back in the next episode. Signing off, Dietmar from argo.berlin.